Xenos asked, "How many wars has Earth survived?" Veteran checked notes. "This millennium? If you are not a heretic, then declare your city of origin. Leave a comment, a like, and subscribe to the Emperor's Glory. At the conclusion, rate this tale from 0 to 10. The Emperor protects." The first thing Commander Vexahara noticed about the humans wasn't their crude armor or their laughably primitive weapons. It wasn't even their bizarre pack-bonding behavior, though watching a towering, armored giant attempt to pet her security officer's fur had been disturbing. No, what struck the Felinar commander was how they smelled of death, yet radiated an almost manic joy. "Commander," whispered her tactical officer, Chief Analyst Mordan, his canine features twisted in confusion. "The human delegation has arrived, but our atmospheric scanners are detecting traces of combat stimulants, oxidized metal, and... Is that burned flesh?" Vexhara's ears flicked nervously as she watched the 5 humans stride across her command deck. The largest wore massive blue armor, decorated with skulls and golden eagles. His helmet bore the inscription, "Ultramarines," in stark lettering. Behind him, a woman in gleaming silver power armor carried a weapon that looked like it could level city blocks. Her armor bore flame motifs and the words, "Order of the Sacred Rose." The 3 others wore simpler green flak armor, but their eyes held the same unsettling intensity. "Greetings, Xenos," rumbled the giant in blue, his voice amplified by external speakers. "I am Sergeant Cassius of the Ultramarines chapter. We received your distress beacon regarding the Hive Fleet Maw approaching your colonies." Vexhara straightened her spine, trying to project authority despite being dwarfed by the human. "Welcome aboard the Starfang, Sergeant. I am Commander Vexhara of the Felinar Defense Coalition. We appreciate your response to our plea for aid, though I confess surprised that the Imperium would send so few warriors against such a threat." The woman in silver armor laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Few? Sister Superior Celestine speaks for the Order of the Sacred Rose. These guardsmen represent the 47th Cadian Shock Troops, and Sergeant Cassius," she gestured to the giant. "Well, one Space Marine is worth a regiment." Chief Mordan's tail bristled. "Commander, our intelligence suggests the approaching Tyranid swarm numbers in the millions. Their bioships darken space itself. Perhaps the humans don't understand the scale of..." "Millions," interrupted one of the guardsmen, grinning beneath his helmet. "Bloody hell, Sarge. Remember Hive Fleet Kraken? That was billions easy." "Language, Trooper Hayes," barked another guardsman with elaborate rank insignia. "But millions is a Tuesday." Vexhara's whiskers twitched. "You've encountered these creatures before?" Sergeant Cassius nodded solemnly. "The Tyranids have threatened the Imperium for millennia. They are indeed a grave threat. They devour everything, biomass, atmosphere, even the minerals in planetary cores. They learn from each battle, adapting their organisms to counter our tactics." "Then you understand why we called for aid," Vexhara said, relief flooding her voice. "Our Quantum Coalition forces number barely 50,000 across 7 worlds. We lack the industrial capacity to..." "50,000?" Sister Celestine's eyebrows rose. "Across 7 worlds? How do you maintain order with so few troops?" "Order?" Mordan's ears perked in confusion. "Commander, I think there's been a translation error. The humans seem to think 50,000 is small." The guardsmen exchanged glances. Trooper Hayes cleared his throat. "Begging your pardon, Xenos, but 50,000 barely qualifies as a decent regiment. How many total citizens do these 7 worlds support?" "Approximately 40 million across all colonies," Vexhara replied, pride evident in her voice. "Our largest world, New Praxis, houses nearly 15 million souls." The humans fell silent. Sister Celestine removed her helmet, revealing a scarred but beautiful face framed by silver hair. Her expression was almost pitying. 40 million, she repeated slowly, "across 7 worlds. That's not even a proper hive city," muttered one of the guardsmen. Sergeant Cassius cleared his throat, his helmet's Vox grill crackling. "Commander Vexhara, perhaps you could share your defensive capabilities. Orbital platforms, void shields, planetary defense lasers." Vexhara gestured proudly to her bridge displays. "Our most advanced world possesses 12 orbital defense satellites, each equipped with plasma cannons capable of cracking asteroids. We have ion barriers around major population centers, and our best fighters carry quantum torpedoes." The silence stretched uncomfortably. Plasma cannons, repeated the commissar, slowly. That cracked asteroids. Yes, our engineers assure me they could destroy objects up to 0.5 kilometer in diameter. Sister Celestine made the sign of the Aquila across her chest. Emperor, preserve us, she whispered. Is something wrong? Vexahara asked, her tail lashing with growing anxiety. Sergeant Cassius stepped forward, his massive frame blocking her view of the other humans. When he spoke, his voice carried a gentleness that seemed at odds with his intimidating appearance. Commander, I must ask about your people's military doctrine. How do your forces typically engage superior numbers? Superior numbers? Vexahara's ears flattened. Standard coalition doctrine emphasizes tactical withdrawal when outnumbered more than 3 to 1. We preserve forces for strategic counterattacks once enemy resources are overextended. 3 to 1, Hayes repeated faintly. And if retreat isn't possible, pressed the commissar. Our commanders are trained to negotiate surrender terms that preserve civilian populations. The coalition values every life. We cannot afford to waste our people in hopeless battles. The humans exchanged another series of glances that somehow conveyed entire conversations. Commander, Sergeant Cassius said carefully, has your coalition ever fought an enemy that sought total annihilation rather than conquest? Total annihilation? Vexahara's whiskers trembled. What military purpose would that serve? Even the key. Most aggressive species seek resources or territory. Destroying everything leaves nothing to claim. Sister Celestine stepped forward, her power armor servo motors whirring softly. The Tyranids don't seek conquest, child. They consume. Every living thing, every scrap of organic matter, even the atmosphere itself. They leave nothing but bare rock, then move to the next system. That's not possible. No species could sustain itself through such waste. They're not from this galaxy, Commissar Kane interrupted. They've already devoured countless others. To them, the Milky Way is just another feeding ground. Vexahara felt her legs weaken. Then, negotiation? They don't communicate except through violence, Hayes added grimly. Trust us. We've tried. The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of life support systems. Vexahara stared at the tactical display, showing the approaching Tyranid swarm. The bioships moved in perfect coordination, already, past the outer system markers. How long until they reach New Praxis? She asked weakly. 67 hours, Mordan reported, his voice barely steady. Sergeant Cassius nodded. Then we have work to do. He turned to his companions. Sister Celestine, begin preparing sacred ammunition. Commissar Kane, assess the local guard capabilities for emergency conscription. Troopers Hayes and Morrison, catalog available industrial resources for field fortifications. Conscription? Vexahara's voice cracked. You can't mean to fight them directly. The numbers alone, numbers matter, but they're not everything, Sister Celestine said, checking her bolt pistol's ammunition feed. Faith matters. Courage matters. Sometimes righteousness matters more than tactical advantage. That's insanity. The humans paused their preparations. Commissar Kane fixed her with a stare that seemed to pierce straight through her soul. Commander, he said quietly, what's insane is assuming we'll lose before the fight begins. The Imperium has stood for 10,000 years against horrors you can't imagine. We've faced odds that would break any rational species. His scarred face cracked into a grin. Fortunately, we stopped being rational somewhere around the 38th millennium. But the casualties will be acceptable, Sergeant Cassius stated with absolute certainty. Every life given in service to the Emperor has meaning. Every death in defense of the innocent is a victory. Vexahara stared at them in growing horror. These humans spoke of certain death as if discussing the weather. They planned to fight millions of planet-devouring aliens with a handful of warriors and called it reasonable. They were either the bravest beings she'd ever encountered or the most delusional. Commander, Morden whispered urgently, incoming priority transmission from New Praxis Command. The main display flickered to life, showing the terrified face of General Rexhai, the Coalition's supreme military commander. Behind him, Vexahara could see junior officers in obvious panic. Vexahara, Rexhai gasped. Thank the ancestors you're there. The swarm. It's massive beyond our worst projections. Bioships the size of continents, escort organisms that dwarf our largest vessels. We're preparing immediate evacuation of— General, Sergeant Cassius interrupted, stepping into the transmission's field of view. I am Sergeant Cassius, Ultramarines. Chapter: Evacuation is not an option. Rexhigh's eyes widened at the towering human. Who? Evacuation is our only hope. You cannot possibly expect us to stand against— I expect you to do your duty, the Space Marine replied calmly. The Emperor protects those who fight in his name. The transmission cut abruptly. In the sudden silence, Vexhara realized her species was about to learn exactly what kind of allies they'd summoned, and she wasn't sure if that was salvation or damnation. The tactical display showed what any rational military mind would consider a complete disaster. 3 billion Vraktar bioforms spreading across the Kethvar homeworld like a living plague, their hive ships blotting out the system's twin suns. Admiral Thessica of the Tau Watercast watched the readouts with growing despair, his blue skin pale beneath the bridge's emergency lighting. Honored Admiral, his Firecast liaison reported, voice steady despite the circumstances. The Kethvar defense fleets have been reduced to 12% operational capacity. Their ground forces are in full retreat across all continents. Thessica's auxiliary sensor cluster twitched with agitation. The Kethvar, a proud feline species with remarkable tactical acumen, had held the line against Vraktar incursions for 6 rotations. Their homeworld of Keth Prime was considered impregnable, its orbital defenses legendary among the species of the Damocles Gulf. Yet here, they were watching an entire civilization face extinction. Any word from the greater good reinforcements? Thessica asked, though he already knew the answer. Negative, sir. The closest Firecast contingent is 8 rotations away minimum. Through the viewport, Thessica could see the dying flickers of Kethvar ships making their last stands in high orbit. Each light that winked out represented thousands of lives, families, cultures that would never exist again once the Vraktar finished their feast. He had witnessed 17 such extinctions during his service to the Tau Empire. The galaxy was vast, but it felt smaller every time another species fell to the bioswarm. Sir, his communications officer interrupted, mandibles clicking nervously. We're receiving a transmission. Multiple contacts dropping out of warp on the system's edge. Vraktar reinforcements? Thessica asked, dreading the answer. Negative, sir. The energy signatures are unusual. Primitive fusion drives, but the ships are massive. Crude construction, but heavily armored. And, sir, the officer paused, antenna twitching. They're broadcasting on multiple frequencies in low Gothic. Thessica felt his auxiliary heart skip a beat. Low Gothic meant only one thing in this part of the galaxy. Humans, sir. Imperial humans. The Admiral's hooves clicked against the deck plating as he moved to the sensor station. Humans were a young species, barely past their industrial age when the Tau Empire had first encountered them during the Damocles Crusade. Primitive, violent, and utterly irrational by Tau standards. Their technology was crude, their tactics suicidal, and their devotion to their corpse emperor bordered on the pathological. They were also, Thessica had to grudgingly admit, remarkably difficult to kill. How many ships? He asked. Difficult to determine, sir. Their jamming arrays are interfering with our auspex, but initial estimates suggest 12 capital vessels and approximately 40 escorts. Against 3 billion bioforms? Yes, sir. Thessica stared at the tactical display in disbelief. Even the vaunted Imperial Navy wouldn't be so reckless as to engage a full Vraktar swarm with such limited forces, would they? The answer came in the form of a broad-spectrum Vox transmission that filled the bridge with static-laden Gothic. This is Strike Commander Mordian of the 23rd Cadian Shock Troops, aboard the Imperial vessel Hammer of the Emperor. To any surviving Xenos forces in system, withdraw to minimum safe distance and prepare for Imperial intervention. By order of the God Emperor of mankind, this system is under Imperial protection. The Emperor protects. Thessica's translator struggled with several of the archaic terms, but the meaning was clear enough. The humans intended to fight. Sir, his Firecast liaison said carefully, perhaps we should comply with their request. Human tactics can be unpredictable. Unpredictable was a charitable way to describe them. During the Damocles Crusade, Thessica had witnessed human soldiers charge Tau battle lines with nothing but primitive chemical propellant weapons and serrated knives, screaming prayers to their deity. He had seen them hold positions that should have been overrun within minutes, dying to the last soldier rather than retreating. Most disturbing of all, he had seen their primitive technology function. Through what could only be described as faith-based engineering, it defied every principle of rational warfare, yet somehow it worked. "Open a channel to the HFY command structure," Thessica ordered. "Inform them that Imperial reinforcements have arrived, then pull our fleet back to the designated coordinates." As the Tau fleet began its withdrawal, Thessica watched the human ships advance toward Keth Prime. Their formation was crude by Tau standards. No elegant dance of coordinated fire teams, no sophisticated targeting algorithms. Just 12 massive, cathedral-like vessels surrounded by smaller escorts, all advancing in a straight line toward the Vraktar swarm. "Sir," the communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the HFY surface. Sector Commander Vashara wishes to speak with you." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the scarred visage of a HFY veteran. Vashara's orange fur was matted with blood and combat stimulants, her feline features drawn with exhaustion. Behind her, the sound of distant explosions suggested the conversation would be brief. "Admiral Thessica," Vashara said, her voice carrying the weight of a species facing extinction. "We are grateful for Tau assistance, but I must ask, what manner of allies have you brought us? Our long-range auspex shows human vessels approaching the system." "Indeed, Sector Commander. A human Imperial strike force has arrived and assumed operational control of the system's defense." Vashara's ears flattened against her skull. "Humans. Admiral, with respect, we have studied Imperial tactical doctrine. Their preferred method of warfare involves frontal assault, mass casualties, and victory through attrition. Against a Vraktar swarm of this magnitude, I understand your concerns," Thessica replied. "However, human military capabilities should not be underestimated. They have survived as a species for over 10,000 years in a galaxy that has attempted to extinguish them on multiple occasions. Survived, yes, but at what cost? Their homeworld is a death trap, their society built on fanaticism and brutality. How can such beings possibly comprehend the sophisticated nature of Vraktar hive mind tactics?" Before Thessica could respond, the tactical display erupted in new contacts. The human fleet had reached the outer edge of the Vraktar swarm and opened fire, but instead of the expected long-range bombardment, the Imperial ships were actually accelerating, driving straight into the heart of the bioform mass. "By the greater good," Thessica whispered. "They're not conducting a bombardment. They're conducting a charge." The lead human vessel, the Hammer of the Emperor, was now completely surrounded by Vraktar bioships, its hull blazing with weapons fire. Yet instead of breaking apart under the assault, it seemed to grow brighter, as if the ship itself was somehow feeding on the violence. "Admiral," Vashara said urgently, "you must contact them immediately. They'll be destroyed within minutes if they continue this approach. The Vraktar will simply overwhelm them through sheer numbers." Thessica was about to comply when his communications officer looked up from his station, antenna twitching in confusion. "Sir, we're receiving another transmission from the human strike commander. It's being broadcast on all frequencies, including those monitored by the HFY ground forces." "Put it through." The bridge speakers crackled to life, filled with the distinctive sounds of human warfare, the roar of primitive weapons, the chanting of battle hymns, and underneath it all, a voice speaking in accented low Gothic. "This is Strike Commander Mordian to all Imperial forces and allied Xenos. We have achieved contact with the enemy. Resistance is spirited. All units, prepare for close engagement protocols. Commissariat units, maintain discipline. Tech adepts, begin consecration rituals for ship machine spirits. And remember, soldiers of the Imperium, the Emperor protects, but having a loaded bolter doesn't hurt either." The transmission cut to static, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. "Did he just make a joke?" Vashara asked incredulously. "In the middle of a battle for species survival? Human psychology is complex," Thessica admitted. He turned to his sensor operator. "Status report on the human fleet." "Sir, this is impossible. The lead vessel has taken direct hits from 17 bioform rams and 4 acid spore clusters. By all calculations, it should be nothing but debris. Instead, it appears to be singing." "Singing?" "Yes, sir. Our audio pickups are detecting coordinated vocalizations from within the human ships, harmonic patterns consistent with religious hymns." Thessica felt a familiar chill run down his spine. He had heard human battle songs before, during the siege of Talith. The memory still featured prominently in his stress dreams. On the tactical display, something extraordinary was beginning to happen. The Vraktar bioforms, which had been converging on the human ships in perfect hive-mind coordination, were starting to show signs of confusion. Their attack patterns were becoming erratic, as if the swarm's collective consciousness was struggling to process the human response to their assault. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "the bioforms appear to be exhibiting unprecedented behavioral anomalies. Their coordination algorithms are failing." "Explain." "Vraktar tactics rely on predictable enemy responses, retreat when overwhelmed, prioritize survival over objectives, break formation when casualties exceed acceptable parameters. The human ships are doing none of these things. They're advancing into the swarm while taking catastrophic damage. Their formation is becoming more coherent under fire, and their rate of fire is actually increasing as they sustain casualties." Thessica studied the display with growing amazement. The human fleet was now completely enveloped by the Vraktar swarm, yet somehow, impossibly, they were pushing through. The bioform mass was actually beginning to part around them, as if the hive mind couldn't calculate an appropriate response to such suicidal determination. "Admiral," Vashra said softly, "what are we witnessing?" "The reason," Thessica replied, "that humanity has survived 10,000 years of galactic warfare." The answer came in the form of another human transmission, this one originating from somewhere deep within the bioform swarm. "This is Commissar Velt of the 23rd Cadian. To any Imperial forces listening, we have achieved breakthrough to Keth Prime orbital space. Astartes drop pods are launching now. Ground assault commencing in 30 seconds. All units, remember your oaths to the Golden Throne. Today we stand between civilization and the void. Today we are the Emperor's wrath made manifest. For the Emperor, for humanity, for the Imperium." The transmission was punctuated by the distinctive sound of Imperial drop pods launching, a noise that Thessica had learned to associate with imminent and disproportionate violence. Through the tactical display, he watched as dozens of armored pods punched through Keth Prime's atmosphere, each one carrying what Imperial doctrine classified as post-human super-soldiers. Space, Marines, Astartes, the Emperor's finest. Vashra's ears were now flat against her skull, her pupils dilated with what Thessica recognized as species-wide terror. "Admiral," she whispered, "they're not just fighting the swarm, they're enjoying it." The reptilian commander's neural implants flickered with confusion as he analyzed the tactical readouts. The mammalian coalition should have been routed hours ago. Their fleet was a patchwork of different technologies, their formations chaotic, and their communication channels filled with what his translators labeled as religious chanting. Yet somehow, impossibly, they were winning. Admiral Kethvar of the Tauri flotilla watched through the view screen as another human vessel, its hull breached and venting atmosphere, rammed directly into a reptilian dreadnought. The human captain's final transmission was simply, "For the Emperor, no retreat, no surrender." "This is madness," whispered Subcommander Veltara, her blue skin pale with shock. That ship had escape pods. They could have evacuated. The Eldar Farseer Alatok stood silent, his ancient mind struggling to comprehend the tactical display. In his 3 millennia of existence, he had never witnessed such creative brutality. The humans weren't following any recognized doctrine. They were writing their own rules with blood and fire. "Sister Superior Judith," the Vox crackled, as Captain Rodriguez established contact with the Sororitas. Battle Group. Status report on boarding action. "Purging deck 7 through 12, Captain," came the serene reply, punctuated by bolter fire and screaming. "Resistance is enthusiastic. Sisters Agatha and Bethany have achieved martyrdom. We sing hymns for their souls as we cleanse this vessel." Kethvar's ears twitched in disbelief. The human female spoke of death as if discussing the weather. His own species mourned casualties for cycles, held elaborate ceremonies, questioned command decisions. These humans celebrated sacrifice. Commissar Vex emerged from the strategy chamber, his greatcoat singed and his chainsword dripping something that definitely wasn't oil. Commander Garcia reports successful capture of the reptilian command vessel. Slight complications with crew morale. Had to execute 3 guardsmen for cowardice. Cowardice? Asked Dr. Chirpwing, the avian scholar whose feathers had been ruffled since the battle began. What constituted cowardice in this context? They hesitated before charging a position defended by plasma cannons, Vex replied matter-of-factly. Hesitation spreads. Better to remove the infection before it corrupts the entire unit. The assembled Xenos representatives exchanged horrified glances. Even the Orc liaison, yes, there was an Orc liaison, which was its own kind of nightmare, seemed impressed by the casual brutality. Humies is proper Orky, rumbled Warboss Scarfang, his tusks gleaming. They know that sometimes you gotta crump your own boys to keep 'em sharp. That's actually quite good. High praise from a species that considered recreational violence an art form. Tech Priest Gamma 77 approached the command console, his mechanical limbs interfacing directly with the ship's systems. Binary cant streamed from his Vox grill as he communicated with the machine spirit. The alien observers watched in fascination as he performed what appeared to be technological sorcery. The Omnissiah guides our weapons, he intoned, red mechadendrites dancing across control surfaces. The machine spirits sing hymns of destruction. All systems report blessed functionality. Farseer Alaitok leaned closer to Kethvar. Their technology, he whispered. It functions through belief. Pure, unfiltered faith. This should be impossible. Many things about these humans should be impossible, Kethvar replied, watching as a squad of Imperial Guardsmen charged across open space, using grappling hooks and sheer determination to assault a reptilian frigate. Yet here we are. The battle had been raging for 18 standard hours. Most species would have withdrawn for rest cycles, medical treatment, strategic recalibration. The humans were actually gaining momentum. Their casualties were staggering by any civilized standard, nearly 30% across all units. But instead of retreating, they sang louder. Contact incoming, reported Navigator Quintos, his third eye blazing with warp-touched energy. Large reptilian fleet dropping out of the Immaterium, estimated 300 vessels. The alien coalition tensed. Their own fleet numbered barely 100 ships, and they were already heavily damaged. This was clearly the main reptilian force. The earlier engagement had been merely a probe. Tactical assessment, Commissar Vex asked calmly, as if discussing breakfast rather than impending annihilation. Hopeless, admitted Sub-Commander Veltara. We should withdraw, regroup, seek diplomatic solutions. Withdraw? Captain Rodriguez looked genuinely confused. Sister Superior, what is our position on withdrawal? The Ecclesiarchy is quite clear on this matter, Captain, came Sister Judith's voice over the Vox, still calm despite the sound of chainswords in the background. Retreat is heresy. Victory is the only acceptable outcome. There you have it, Rodriguez smiled, turning to the assembled Xenos commanders. We don't retreat. We attack. Attack? Dr. Chirpwing's voice rose to a panicked squawk. They outnumber us 3-1, with fresh crews and undamaged vessels. The Emperor has given us everything we need for victory, Tech Priest Gamma 77 declared, his optical sensors blazing red. We need only the will to claim it. Warboss Scarfang was literally vibrating with excitement. Dis is gonna be a right proper fight. Me and the boys haven't had a good scrap like dis in ages. The reptilian fleet advanced in perfect formation, their ships sleek and deadly. Admiral Kethvar's tactical displays showed optimal positioning, synchronized firing solutions, textbook naval doctrine. It was beautiful in its precision. The human response was chaos incarnate. All ships, Captain Rodriguez broadcast on all frequencies, prepare for general assault. Remember, the Emperor judges not by victory alone, but by the courage shown in its pursuit. Today we show these Xenos what human courage looks like. For the Emperor, for humanity, charge! What followed defied every tactical manual ever written. The Imperial fleet accelerated directly toward the reptilian formation. No fancy maneuvers, no clever flanking. Just a straight-line assault that should have been suicide. The Sororitas vessels led the charge, their hulls painted in sacred crimson, hymns of battle echoing across the Vox channels. Behind them came the Guard. The transports, bristling with weapons and determination. The Space Marine strike cruiser Emperor's Wrath carved through enemy fire like a blessed blade, returning fire with devastating precision. Impossible, breathed Farseer Alaitok. Their formation has 17 critical weaknesses. The reptilians should be exploiting them. But the reptilians, like every other species, fought according to rational doctrine. They aimed for weak points, concentrated fire on damaged vessels, followed logical targeting priorities. The humans apparently had never learned logic. A heavily damaged guard transport, listing badly and venting plasma, suddenly changed course and rammed into a reptilian battleship. The explosion took out 3 more enemy vessels caught in the blast radius. "Did they just use their own ship as a proximity mine?" asked Veltara, her voice barely a whisper. "Standard Imperial Navy tactic," Captain Rodriguez replied proudly. "When conventional weapons fail, the ship itself becomes a weapon. The crew considers it an honor." The battle turned into something beyond tactical analysis. It became a test of wills, and in that contest, humanity had advantages that no amount of technology could overcome. They simply refused to acknowledge defeat as a possibility. Sister Superior Judith's voice cut through the chaos. "We have boarded the reptilian flagship, meeting heavy resistance, but the Emperor's light guides our steps. Sisters Agnes and Catherine have found their martyrdom. We advance singing their praise." Hours passed. The reptilian fleet, despite numerical superiority, found itself gradually overwhelmed by an enemy that fought like cornered animals. If cornered animals had access to orbital bombardment and religious fervor. As the last reptilian vessel exploded in brilliant nuclear fire, the assembled alien commanders stood in stunned silence. They had witnessed something that would change their understanding of warfare forever. "Tactical debrief in 1 hour," Captain Rodriguez announced casually. "Tech priests will begin repairs immediately. Commissar Vex will handle casualty reports and any necessary disciplinary actions." Questions? No one had questions. They were too busy trying to process what they had just witnessed. The human fleet, battered but victorious, began forming up for the next phase of their mission. Because apparently defeating impossible odds wasn't an endpoint. It was. Just Tuesday afternoon in the Imperial Navy. High above them all, something vast and ancient stirred in the void, drawn by the psychic echoes of so much death and determination. The real test was about to begin. The Catherian command ship shuddered as another volley of reptilian plasma tore through its hull. Admiral Zephyr's feathers ruffled in distress as he watched his fleet crumble on the tactical display. "Sir, we've lost 60% of our vessels," his aide chirped nervously. "The Serpentine Armada has us completely surrounded. They're demanding unconditional surrender." Zephyr's talons clicked against his command perch. The Catherians had fought valiantly, but the Reptilian Empire's technology was simply superior. Their stealth ships had appeared from nowhere, turning what should have been a defensive stand into a massacre. "Admiral!" The communications officer's voice cracked with excitement. "Unknown vessels approaching from the outer system. Energy. Signatures. I've never seen anything like this." On the view screen, massive wedge-shaped ships emerged from the warp. They were crude compared to Catherian elegance or reptilian sleekness, yet they radiated menace. Gothic cathedrals welded to battleships, covered in skulls and aquilers. "This is Captain Thaddeus Kane of the Imperial Navy," a gravelly voice crackled through the comm. "We received your distress beacon. The Emperor protects Xenos." Zephyr blinked in confusion. "Emperor? We sent no beacon to any—" "Sir," his aide interrupted. "The reptilian flagship is hailing us. General Skitar wants to speak." The view screen split, showing the cold reptilian face of their nemesis, alongside a scarred human in a naval uniform. General Escatar's forked tongue flicked out as he spoke. "Admiral Zephyr, introduce your new allies to the reality of this situation. Surrender now, and your people will live as slaves. Continue this charade, and we will glasses your homeworld." Captain Kane's weathered face showed no emotion. "Xenos, you will withdraw immediately, or face the Emperor's wrath." Escatar's laugh was like grinding glass. "Foolish mammals, you are outnumbered 3-1. Your primitive ship cannot match our technology." 3-1? Kane's scarred face split into a grin. "The Emperor has blessed us with such favorable odds." Zephyr watched in fascination as the humans' fleet arranged itself in what appeared to be a suicidal formation. They were charging directly into the reptilian battle line. "Those humans are insane," his aide whispered. "They're going to ram the enemy ships." But as the Imperial vessels closed distance, something impossible happened. Their primitive weapons began finding marks with devastating accuracy. Reptilian shields designed to deflect energy weapons proved useless against physical projectiles fired at incredible velocities. "Ramming speed!" Kane's voice boomed across the comm channels. "For the Emperor!" The Imperial ships didn't just ram, they punched through reptilian vessels like spears through paper. HFY watched in amazement as a human cruiser, its hull breached and venting atmosphere, continued firing even as it careened into two enemy destroyers. "How are they still fighting?" HFY breathed. "Their life support systems have failed." On the tactical display, impossible scenes played out. Human crew members, exposed to vacuum, were somehow still manning their weapons stations. Ships with their bridges completely destroyed continued coordinated attacks. "Faith, Xenos," Captain Kane's voice carried a reverent tone, even as explosions rocked his ship. "The Emperor protects those who serve." General Skatar's composure cracked. "Impossible. No species can survive such damage." "You haven't met humans from a death world," Kane replied calmly. "We were forged in Terra's crucible. This is just another Tuesday." The tide turned with shocking speed. Reptilian ships, designed for overwhelming technological superiority, couldn't adapt to enemies who simply refused to die when killed. Human vessels, burning and broken, kept fighting until their reactors went critical. "Admiral," HFY's aide reported in wonder, "the reptilian formation is breaking. They're retreating." On screen, General Skatar's cold demeanor had given way to something HFY had never seen in a reptilian: fear. "This is not over, humans," Skatar hissed. "The Empire will return with 100 fleets." Captain Kane's response was delivered with absolute certainty. "And we'll kill them too. The Emperor's light shines on all who threaten the innocent." As the reptilian fleet fled into the warp, HFY found himself staring at the human captain. Half his face was covered in blood, his uniform was torn, and his ship was venting plasma from dozens of breaches. Yet he stood at attention, as if nothing had happened. "Captain Kane," HFY managed, "your losses, how many ships?" "Losses?" Kane looked genuinely puzzled. "Admiral, we haven't lost any ships. The Emperor protects." HFY checked his sensors again. Every human vessel was catastrophically damaged, yet somehow still operational. Crews were already conducting repairs while singing what sounded like funeral hymns. "But your casualties, every soul lost today died in the Emperor's service," Kane said solemnly. "Their sacrifice ensures your people's freedom. There is no greater honor." Over the next hours, HFY watched human engineering teams perform what could only be described as miracles. They welded hull breaches with prayers, restored power systems through ritual chanting, and somehow made their ships space-worthy again. A young human tech priest approached his vessel for repairs. When HFY asked how their technology worked, the response left him speechless. "The machine spirits respond to faith and proper ritual-honored Xenos. We ask the Emperor's blessing, perform the sacred litanies, and they serve gladly. But that's not how technology works." "With respect, Admiral," the tech priest interrupted gently, "it works fine for us. The Emperor provides." As the human fleet prepared to depart, Captain Kane made an unexpected offer. "Admiral HFY, your people fought with honor today. Should you ever need aid, simply call upon the Imperium. The Emperor's protection extends to all who stand against the darkness." HFY's communication officer, who had been monitoring human transmissions, suddenly went pale. "Admiral, I've been analyzing their combat data. Sir, they weren't even trying hard." "What do you mean?" "This was a patrol squadron, sir, a small one. Their home fleet has tens of thousands of ships. And, sir, their homeworld isn't a paradise like ours. It's a fortress world where every citizen is a soldier." As the Imperial ships vanished into the warp, HFY stood in stunned silence. These humans had saved his entire species as a casual good deed. Months later, when reptilian scouts approached Cytherian space again, they found something that sent them fleeing in terror. Cytherian ships flying beside their vessels' banners bearing the Imperial Aquila. The message was clear. These Xenos were under human protection now. And in the grim darkness of the far future, that was the most terrifying protection one could have. General Skatar never returned to that sector. Intelligence reports spoke of humans who drank poison for pleasure, who considered death in battle the highest honor, and who turned their entire star systems into fortress worlds just because they enjoyed the challenge. The Reptilian Empire quietly struck the Cytherian system from their expansion plans. Some prey, they learned, came with predators too dangerous to challenge. The Cytherians never forgot the day humans taught them that in a universe of monsters, sometimes the greatest monsters fight for the light. And somewhere in the Imperium's vast archives, a simple log entry recorded, "Xenos protection detail completed successfully. No Imperial casualties. The Emperor protects." For in the grim darkness of the far future there is only war, and humanity doesn't just survive it, they make it their playground. The Emperor protects, always.
Angels